We will start with Marlon and come down this way. So would you please start with your opening statement? Thank you. Yes, and I do want to remind you to please try to remember to speak into the mic because we do have people taping this.
Hey, good evening. Can everyone hear me first of all? Make sure that the audio is good. No?
Is it on?
Is it on?
It should be on if does this one have?
No, yeah, it's on.
Okay, I have to make it a little louder.
All right, why don't we-
Perhaps if they stood up, we'd be able to hear and see better.
Testing. Testing, testing, testing.
There you go.
Testing.
Okay.
Testing, testing. Testing. Testing.
Wait, I'm not sure which.
You're good.
microphone. You're good.
You're good.
Good.
Everybody can hear me?
Okay,
Yep.
all right.
All right.
Proceed.
All right. Good evening. First of all, I'd like to thank the Hilton Neighborhood Association for hosting this evening's forum, and I'd like to thank each and every one of you for coming here tonight. My name is Marlon Brownlee, and I've lived in Maplewood with my wife, Jeanne, for the past 22 years. We haven't just lived here. We've both been very active in the community. We've both been PTA presidents. I've coached kids' basketball teams, was a member of the Township's Recreation Advisory Committee, and was chair of the Board of Trustees for the Community Coalition on Race, and I've done numerous other things as well. For the past 3 years, I've had the privilege of serving you on the Maplewood Township Committee. I'm chair of the Public Safety Committee and the Communications Committee, and the experience has been everything that I thought it would be, challenging and definitely very time-consuming, but ultimately also very rewarding. I enjoy talking to people around town, people like you, sometimes individuals, sometimes groups, sometimes people contact me, and sometimes I reach out to them. And even though our town is only 4 square miles, there are a lot of different things that people want to talk about. Balancing the varying desires of everyone in town can be quite challenging, but I also believe that we all must work together to realize the quality of life that we want. So I listen to what you say and combine that with my own ideas to put together solutions that incorporate the best of those diverse opinions. For the record, that sometimes has led me to take positions that differ from the rest of the Township Committee, but in the end, that's okay. And being a part of public debates on different issues has also given me a greater appreciation for the fact that all issues are important issues. And while some topics garner more headlines, everything is important to somebody. Everything, not just some things. I will say that it's been gratifying to have residents tell me that they appreciate the positions that I've taken and my willingness to consider different points of view. I look forward to speaking with you tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Marlon. Bart?
Hi. You're going to have to excuse me. I have laryngitis, which is should be obvious, I guess. But my name is Art Gartenlaub, and I've been a resident of Maplewood for the last 70 years.
Wow.
Long time. And I have also been quite involved with the town. And I do want to thank the Hilton Neighborhood Association and all of you for showing up tonight. So we can hear some of the reasons that I'm running. Primarily the reason I'm running is that I'm one of the voices that have probably not been heard for a while in town. There are a lot of things that I agree with from the Township Committee, but there are also a lot of things that I don't agree with. What I've looked for is, what I'm seeing is a lot of non-transparency in the governing of the town. There seem to be some things that are going on that I'm just not aware of. And it may be right, may be good, maybe not. I just don't know. And if I don't know, then I'm wondering what's going on. So I am pleased to run for candidate. This is my 3rd time running, and I look forward to hearing from you as well as being elected in November.
Thank you. Kurt?
Hi, my name is Kurt Kiley, and I would like to start by thanking Carol and the Hilton Neighborhood Association for organizing this debate. I'd also like to thank Marlon Brownlee for his service on the Township Committee, as well as I'd like to thank Art out loud for his service to the country as well to our town. Carol and I have only lived in town for 2.5 years. When we were looking for a home, we were looking for a place that we were going to, it was going to be our first and last home. And we know that we made the right decision by coming to Maplewood. Going door to door and listening to everybody's conversations has been one of our concerns about Maplewood has been one of the greatest experiences that I have had in this town. Everybody is eager to share themselves with you. And you can see that the love that people have for this town is incredible. And I would just like to thank everybody for being here at this debate so that we can share our opinions. And thank you.
Thank you. The first question, and we'll start with R, has to do with foreclosed properties. The disrepair of foreclosed residential and commercial properties is a major concern in Maplewood. How can the township improve the bank's maintenances of the foreclosed properties on an ongoing basis?
It's a real interesting question. I did speak to Mr. Mittermeier the other day specifically regarding the foreclosed properties, and he mentioned that the town has in fact put some efforts in place to make sure that the town is not affected or doesn't look to be affected by these foreclosed properties. In the event that the property is not being maintained, they'll send out a DPW crew to clean it up or do grass or snow removal. They then put a lien on the property based on that. But in the old days, and this goes back a number of years, there a little more was done, and I think that that's an important step in these foreclosed properties. What had happened, the township had worked with a number of the banks that were foreclosing properties and worked with them so they wouldn't be boarded up. There'd be no evidence that the property was being or had been abandoned. I think it's a good idea. I also think that if the properties are not being properly maintained, there should be greater fines. We could add greater fines to those particular properties.
Thank you. Kurt?
While walking through the Hilton neighborhood, I noticed that there were many homes that were abandoned. You could see that there was a notice that it had been winterized, meaning it had been cleaned out of all the water. So some of them were quite obvious, and some of them weren't. You could see that it looked like they had just gotten a haircut from the DPW because the grass was just cut, and then there was a whole pile of nail laying out there. One of the things that I think we have is we might want to look at raising the discretionary amount where the DPW can get involved without going through the whole process of running it through a resolution through the Township Committee. Right now, the level of improvements is about $200. We might want to raise that up if we can so that there's more discretionary ability by the DPW or the code enforcement agency to clean up the property. I think we also might want to be proactive in these cases. If we know that a property is abandoned or going through foreclosure, we might want to contact the property owner and offer up the services of the DPW and let them hire out the town and just take care of it instead of getting into a battle with them to take care of it. It might be easier for them. We can make it easier on them. It would be easier on us. The other thing I would like to suggest is we want to get people in those homes. So we probably want maybe get a bounty on realtors to get them sold, or talk with the mortgage companies to take a haircut, and we would involve and maybe get a tax credit for improvements for the new home buyers. So really we want to get people in them. We don't want to be just cutting the grass there. Thank you.
Moreland?
Okay, well, residential and commercial properties in foreclosure do pose a challenge. The reality is that no bank is going to care as much about the upkeep of a property as a homeowner or a business owner would. So what can be done? Well, first it should be noted that up until this year, the banks didn't even notify the township that the property was in foreclosure. So the first step is to know that the property is actually in foreclosure. We now do keep a list of foreclosed properties in the building department, and as we find out about each one, it's added to the list. Second, once we know about a property, if it's falling into disrepair, then we can get on the bank's case. Earlier this summer, I was working with a resident on Harding Street who had a complaint about the maintenance of a property next door to theirs, and something that apparently had gone on for years. And while it took a lot of phone calls and pushing, I was able to finally get them to do some long overdue repairs. I will say that because of our advocacy over the years, the banks are now getting better at responding to requests for service. As a result of our advocacy, there's an organization called the Mortgage Bankers Association organization that's given us contact information for each bank so we can use that to get specific problem properties addressed when needed. Nevertheless, despite best efforts, sometimes things don't work out that nicely. So if an owner or mortgage owner is not responsibly maintaining their property, while we don't want to be in the landscaping business, the township will maintain the property and, as Art said, put a tax lien on the property. What this means is that when the property is sold, we, the township, will be reimbursed for our costs in maintaining that property.
Thank you. The next question deals with problems in Maplewood. Besides our high taxes, what do you think is Maplewood's most pressing problem? Describe how you would solve the problem. And we'll start with Kurt.
I think currently our most pressing problem is that all the redevelopment that is going on in town is effectively closed off from all the citizens that are in the town. We have a great number of professionals, brilliant people, that are effectively put on the sidelines during this redevelopment. Particularly with the post office. As the post office process was going through, we had two committees. One is the Transportation Advisory Committee, as well as the Economic Development Advisory Committee, that consisted of residents, expert residents, that were both dissolved. These two committees could have provided valuable input into the development of the post office property, but they were dissolved, and we are less for it. As well as right now we have, you can't throw a stick up in the air in Maplewood and not have it land on top of an architect, an urban planner, a designer. And we don't have a design advisory committee that's involved in any of our redevelopment. We are missing out on opportunities, and we will be falling behind for it. The Economic Development Advisory Committee consists of only township people, except for, I think, Tom Carlson. We should allow, how I would change is reinstate those three committees, get a design advisory committee, and involve the professionals in town. Even anybody in Maplewood has great opinions. We should involve our citizens more in these decisions that are going to be made for 50 to 100 years. Thank you.
Thank you, Kurt. Marlon?
With all due respect, I'm chair of the Public Safety Committee, so I'm going to talk about crime. When I talk to people in groups like this, in meetings, one-on-one, that's what people want to talk about. Did you hear about this? Did you hear about that? Now the reality is, overall crime is down, but we've had a number of high-profile incidents lately. And with all the online media and blogs we have these days, talk about each incident travels further and more quickly. So the perception is that crime is up because we hear about more. But the bottom line, if it's happening anywhere, it's a valid concern. You hear about it and you want to know that you're safe. So like earlier this year, there were shots fired in Maple Crest Park. People were understandably alarmed and wanted to understand what was going on in their neighborhood, what was being done. So I scheduled a community meeting at police headquarters right after the incident to talk to residents about the situation. Two specific outcomes. One, people wanted better lighting in the park, so new and brighter lights have been installed. Two, people wanted security cameras installed. So as head of the Public Safety Committee, I've authorized the chief to purchase security cameras to be installed in the park. I've also asked for the chief to do an assessment of all our parks to see what other changes can be made to secure the safety of our park visitors. We've also given the chief the money to purchase some very sophisticated crime tracking tools to help him in understanding where the hot spots are. And the crimes that are occurring in some areas do call for an increase in police presence in those areas. So as chair of the Public Safety Committee earlier this year, I authorized the chief to increase his use of police overtime to have more people on the streets where and when it is needed. And he has said that this has helped in their crime suppression efforts. Thank you.
Thank you. Board?
Thanks from both of you for pointing out two of the big issues. There are additional issues, though. They all really stem from a lack of communications and/or transparency within our governing body. Very simple. We need to hear more. We need to get more people involved, more citizens involved, who in fact are experts. We have a number of experts who can help us and help us guide us. Certainly the post office is one of those issues right now. There's a group, the Engaged Maplewood Group, certainly has a number of great ideas. I'm also concerned more about the lack of a citizen budget advisory group. They apparently are dormant now. I don't hear from them at all, and they were a great asset to the community. I have a copy of the last budget on my iPad here, and that budget has items on it that I have no idea what they're funding. I'd like to have an organization or group that's willing to sit down and start to do line item audits of our budget. So there are a number of issues. They all do, in fact, come from a lack of communications from the Township Committee, and I think we need to be informed.
Thank you. The next question has to do with the business districts in Maplewood. What would you do to attract better quality and more diverse businesses to the business districts in Maplewood? Irvington Avenue, Maplewood Village, Springfield Avenue are the main ones. And we have to start with Marlon.
Sure. I can't dictate the exact businesses that choose to be here, but there are ways of influencing what types of businesses choose to be here. For example, we can declare an area to be one in need of rehabilitation if it meets state's requirements, which gives us a greater degree of control over the types of construction that can be done on a site. I am in favor of doing this when we can, because while it still doesn't give us 100% control, it does give us more of a say. In addition, there's a bit of cheerleading that can be done as well. I often go to ribbon cuttings for new businesses that are publicized in the press, and businesses looking for places to locate see that and are attracted here. A couple of weeks ago, I went to a ribbon cutting for Viva Z Studio, a new Zumba fitness center on Springfield Avenue, and that's across the street from Eastside Fitness and down the street from CKO Kickboxing, which also opened earlier this year, and Pro Elite Nutrition, which opened last year. So I think you can see a bit of a coming together of health-oriented businesses, which I think we can agree are better quality businesses for Maplewood. I'm also evaluating an innovative program that would reward people for shopping in Maplewood by giving a property tax rebate when they patronize participating Maplewood businesses. This is something that could potentially attract more businesses to come here as well, because they would know that Maplewood residents try to shop locally. It's a win-win situation because you'd get to lower your property taxes by shopping locally, and those businesses would get more business too. Details are still being worked out, but I think that that's something that could be quite useful as well. Thank you.
Art.
As a lot of you know, I've been an advocate of business attraction in Maplewood for an awful long time, having owned a business in Maplewood. I think one of the things that needs to be done is we have to remove some of the restrictions and make it a little easier for businesses to come into town. It's a process, and it's not that it's an unusual process, but it is a process that is not so encouraging for a business to come to Maplewood. Again, the idea of business incentives makes a lot of sense also. We have to do some publicity work. We have to do some work to attract these businesses to our town. I would love to see a couple of anchor stores if at all possible. There's a whole section down near the new police station that's crying for business and for business to come in. I know there are some plans for that. I'd like to see it implemented as quickly as possible.
Thank you. Kurt.
In Maplewood Village, what we need is more parking and more shopping. So right now with the redevelopment of the post office, we're pushing for a bigger grocery store and an apartment building on top of it. I think we'd be better served with more and varied, smaller stores. Actually, Marlon Brownlee mentioned this in his last debate, a collection of eclectic stores. I think that would be a great contribution to the village. And we have to get the parking right. You talk to anybody, 15, 20, 30 years, there's always been a parking issue. It might not mean building a new parking structure. It might mean parking meters. It might mean some signs so people know where the parking is. I have a nice private parking space at the Women's Club because nobody else parks there. Now the secret's out. Maybe I won't be able to park there on my own anymore. So wayfinding could be a good thing for the village. So we have to get the parking right. Parking right in the village means more shopping, more shoppers, better stores, better rateables out of the whole village. Springfield Avenue has its own set of issues. It's not very walkable. It goes storefront, parking lot, muffler shop. It's not a great walking experience. We need to create a great walking experience if we want it to be pedestrian retail friendly. The other thing I'd like to mention is whenever we have vacant spaces, a lot of vacant spaces that are on Springfield Avenue, there are some innovative programs. One is to bring the arts into these vacant spaces. You talk to the landlords, negotiate deals that allow people to perform there or have a gallery showing so the whole area remains vibrant. So it's not just an empty storefront. Something's going on that brings people into the area.
Thank you. Milton School is a school that's located in one of the buildings that was formerly used by St. Joseph's Church in the Hilton area. This is a question. It's a grade 7 through 12 school. The behavior, such as harassment, loitering, and vandalism of Milton School students impacts the quality of life of immediate neighborhood residents. How would you address these problems and maintain safety? We'll start with Art.
I just spoke to Chief Semino the other day regarding Milton School. And what he mentioned was that in the past 2 years, there have been 20 instances, reported instances. Of those, 16, I believe, were internal within the school. Very few were complaints by neighbors. However, if it does become an area of problem, I know we do have police representatives who are part of the school system or attached to the school system. We have to get them more involved. I've always believed in a neighborhood watch association or neighborhood watch group. If that becomes an area that's a problem, we should implement a neighborhood watch.
Thank you. Kurt.
So I asked Carol for a clarification of the question so I could learn a little bit more about what was going on there. She gave me a great summary. So I began to do a little research about the school, and I found that the school originally moved from Livingston. So I called the mayor of Livingston to find out if they had any issues with the school, and he wasn't even familiar that the school was in his town. That's not saying that they didn't have issues, but he had been on the Township Council since 2008, and it was never brought to the town council as an issue. My next call was to actually the director of the school, Virgilio Alomar, who is a very personal person. We had a great discussion. I went to the school, and he explained, he told me about the school. He's very pragmatic about the difficulties he has. Pretty much he related to me the same thing that Art related, that most of the troubles are within the school. They have a very low student population. It's only roughly about 10 students. They actually almost have more teachers and aides than students. They do their best to make sure that the students are always escorted when outside, but they do have incidents where once in a while a student will leave the building unescorted, and when that happens, they have to call the police. They They did have an incident with a student throwing rocks through a window and damaging a person's vehicle, but he thought that they had it resolved. He is actually very excited about meeting Carol. He's was trying to put together an introduction, but hopefully that will happen next week. And he sounds sincere in his wanting to be a good neighbor in the neighborhood. He actually wants the students to actually try to volunteer inside the neighborhood, and he will be contacting the trying to look for the Youth Aid Bureau of the police department so that they can come in and tour the school and that the students can be familiar with them. I must say that when I was at the school, there were no incidents. I went through the area a couple times, there was no incidents, and he seems genuine and wanted to work with the neighborhood, be part of the community.
Thank you. Marlon?
It sounds like we're all reading from the same script and we all did the same thing, so I don't know if I'm going to just repeat everything that was just said. I mean, similarly, had conversations with the chief. Again, the point about the statistics in terms of the number of incidents that have actually been reported, one of the things that chief always says is if you see something, say something. So I would say that if you observe harassment, loitering, or vandalism, please report it to the police. Unless the police are notified each and every time something happens, they can't act on it and they can't do their job of keeping us safe. Again, meeting with the police chief, the school, leaders of the school, the church, to identify what those issues are. Are there particular times of day that these things are happening? Are there certain situations that allow these types of things to happen? So we need to work out some specific steps, some specific agreements to address the root causes of these problems. If the events are happening after school, are there any after-school programs that exist or could be created to give the kids something appealing to do? If it's during the day, do policies need to be adjusted to minimize the opportunities for unsupervised off-site activities? And then once we decide upon what to do, then we'll monitor the situation, see if changes are having the desired effect, and if necessary, make adjustments and go from there. I see my time is up.
Yeah.
Sorry about that.
Thank you. And our last question is our perennial question. It's the Hilton Library, which is our gem in our neighborhood. Are you committed to maintaining the Hilton Library, and what are your reasons? We'll start with Kurt.
When I was growing up, we really didn't have much of anything. But what we did have was a local library branch. And I remember as a kid going to the library, and I just felt wealthy having access to all these books, all this knowledge within walking distance. I can actually say that having access to the library when growing up actually is a cornerstone of who I am today, because I wouldn't have been able to do all the reading and learning that I had access to. I'm a strong advocate at maintaining libraries. Libraries are no longer about books. Books are ways to bring information. Now they will always be about lifetime learning for everybody, from children to adults. I remember my dad going to the library because he didn't have access to the books that he needed to repair our cars. So it's for all ages. Libraries are taking on new roles. There was a great article in the New York Times about how libraries now can be used during emergencies, as we learned during Hurricane Sandy, because they are friendly, welcoming places. And I think that's about all I have to say. I support the library and lifetime learning. Thank you.
Marlon?
Well, I said it 3 years ago and I'll say it again. Yes, I'm committed to maintaining the Hilton branch of the library. And not just because my office hours are there. It's been said that by some that having 2 library branches is a luxury that we can't afford, that other towns don't have 2 library branches. But there are a lot of things that other towns don't have that Maplewood has. When you spend time in the different libraries, and I've done a lot of that. Like I said, my office hours are there, and my wife and I brought our kids to the library so much that they were on a first-name basis with the staff. You see the value that they provide to the community. The return on the investment, as they say, is great. Last week on Tuesday night, I talked for about 45 minutes with a young man named Whitney, a Haitian kid who had walked to the library from nearby with a younger friend of his, and he asked me my name, and we had a wonderful conversation. Now, would that conversation have happened if he had to walk all the way to the main branch on Baker Street? I'm skeptical. And what other opportunities for kids and residents who live in this area might be lost if we were to close the Hilton branch and they have to go all the way over to Baker Street? No, I'm not willing to find out. So in the face of budget cutbacks, it's a challenge, but I can't say it strongly enough. I am committed to keeping the Hilton Library open.
Thank you. Board?
Carol, give the library $1 million and we'll keep it open. How's that? It's all yours. What I really think that I'd like to see is the Hilton, of course, the Hilton Library continue, but and used as the community center that it really has become. I've seen health programs there, I've seen fitness programs there, I've seen reading programs there. I think it's a great asset to the community. But I really would like to see a larger amount of money and grant money going to the library so they can up their technology. So the answer is yes, I'm committed. I would love to see, but even more, use of the library.
Thank you. We now come to the time where we have questions from the audience, and we hope we have some people who have something they'd like to find out that they're thinking about. Anyone? Yes.
This question is for all three candidates, and it has to do with the recent emphasis on redevelopment in town, particularly in Maplewood Avenue, but also in the Hilton neighborhood with the new apartments that are going up directly adjacent to DeHart Park. Do you think that this is an appropriate thing for the town to be doing at this point in time? Or do you think maybe we should take a step back and see if we need to give more thought to things such as keeping the post office in the village and thinking about what we should really be doing with the Women's Club?
Does anyone want to start, or we can start with Marlon? It's your turn.
I do think it's the appropriate time. One of the things that people have lamented for years has to do with the fact that we've got a property tax burden that is well nigh unsustainable, and part of the reasoning, part of the cause behind that is the fact that we're 95% plus residential, and so the property tax burden disproportionately falls upon the residents to fund all the things that we want, good schools, police force, fire, etc. And so when we have an opportunity to do things to reduce that disproportionate tax burden, and I've been an advocate for mixed-use facilities because it's a mix of residential and commercial, I see that as an opportunity that should be gone after. When we talk about the types of residences that we're talking about, I am not in favor of having residences that have the possibility of having multiple, many bedrooms where you potentially could have many children because of the fact that now the school system is going to have to deal with that extra influx of students, and we're pretty well tapped out in terms of the number of schools that are in the schools. And so we try to limit it to 1 and 2 bedroom units so that the number of children coming along with that new development is less. So again, in terms of the timing, if you would, when is the right time? Well, we've had these opportunities come to us at this point. We've got some opportunities to take advantage of that. And so, is it the right time? I would argue yes, and that's my answer.
I think you may be right, Joan, that we should step back a little bit and take a look at what it's really costing us to run this town. Maplewood is becoming a big business, very large business, compared to what it was many years ago. I do agree that if we are going to do any sort of redevelopment, it should include single unit or senior citizen type properties to keep some of the assault guys around. So I'm not sure if it is a good time right now. I think that it's a time for reflection, I think, at this point. Let's look at the budget, what we're spending. And I'm going to talk a little bit in the close-up about things that we're spending that just seem to be out of control. So I think your point about being a time to look back and reflect, make a good point right now.
So I'll break this up into two areas, Maplewood Avenue and the Burnett Street development. So right now in the Maplewood Avenue development, we have the post office, lots of discussion going on with the post office. But we also have the Women's Club property that's in play. And you know, the post office property, again, is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. We should, now that we own the Women's Club property, to see how we can benefit and take advantage of both of these properties, and take a look and see how we can reset the tone for the whole village. Let's address the parking issue in the village with the post office development. Let's turn the Women's Club into an anchor. We can make it let's revitalize it and make it a vibrant piece of the village. I think the Tom Kearns proposal to turn it into a mecca for the arts is something that really fits the character of Maplewood. It would attract people into the village. If we just focus on these individual pieces of it, instead of looking at the whole thing, we miss the whole picture. We're looking at the trees and not at the forest. We have a once in a, Marlon, I'm happy to hear what your opinion is on this. We can take a step back. It's not a rush. The post office wants to be there for another 6 or so many months. That gives us an opportunity to take a look at all the opportunities that we have. With the Burnett Avenue development, Marlon was saying that we wanted to get some taxes out of it. Well, we got a pilot out of it. So we didn't get all the taxes we could have. And we also got a 30-year pilot rather than a 5-year pilot. So, your children and grandchildren are going to be supporting that development there. I don't think that just by changing the number of bedrooms, you're going to, discourage families from moving in. Growing up, we grew up in a 2-bedroom house with 5 people in it. Growing up in Elizabeth, there are many people that were doing that. A lot of people will come here for the schools because it's very family friendly, and if they're looking for a space and they find an attractive place in an apartment with their kids, they're going to move there. So if we want to actually, what we really want to do is start making it friendly for empty nesters to stay. We talked about taxes. That's one of the calculations that happens. Kids move out. What are we doing? We still have to pay for college. Maybe this tax burden isn't so great. So we need to make sure that the town starts becoming like an empty nester type friendly town.
Thank you.
Yeah, well, just to elaborate, we talk about, you mentioned yourself being a bit older, and I do respect older than me. I've been here for 22 years, and every time I say that, I always run into somebody like you who's been here even longer. And certainly, senior citizen housing and things like that. But, in looking at Maplewood, things do evolve over time. And we certainly need to make sure that we have adequate housing for empty nesters, of which I'm a newly joined member of, and senior citizens, but also young professionals as well. This is a multi-generational type of thing. And to the extent that we're looking to Maplewood of the future, we want to have opportunities for young professionals to maybe get a foothold in Maplewood as well, because those are the people who are going to be the residents of Maplewood X number of years from now. And then the other thing is, obviously, we talk about what's going on in the village. And, I appreciate, the talk about what's going on in the village, but, Maplewood is bigger than that. We're sitting here in the Hilton Neighborhood Association, and, talk about Springfield Avenue. We've got a property, the PS&G building on Springfield Avenue as well. And so I think that we need to look at all of those different things. And so that's what I'm paying attention to, not just one particular area, but all the different properties that are in Maplewood as well. So I just wanted to make that comment.
Thank you. Is there another question? Yes?
Yeah, two questions actually, one for an incumbent and one for prospective candidates. Marlon, when you look at the last 3 years of your term on the Township Committee, you get to run on what you've done, what you've accomplished. We get to hear what they believe, what they hope. But what's the one thing that you're the proudest of that you've accomplished? And let me just distinguish that. An opportunity, a problem, where you've led the charge to actually come up with a plan resolve, and it's been a measurable outcome that's improved the situation. And then if I can, ask the potential candidates a question.
One of the things that I did, I'm chair of the Public Safety Committee, as I mentioned, but I'm also chair of the Communications Committee. And one of the things I resolved earlier this year was to push forward on a number of community building initiatives to improve the communication that needs to take place between the township and its residents. And while this is an ongoing need, I think this was something that really came to the fore after Superstorm Sandy, when people were trying to get the word about what was going on in town. And one of the things that I did was, I would go to the library and I would, talk about, hey, here's the latest update and things like that. But in thinking back, how can we facilitate that exchange of information? So one of the things I did earlier this year was I formed a group called the Maplewood Community Action Program, called MCAP for short, to bring together the heads of the different neighborhood associations that are in town. One of the things I observed was, the Hilton Neighborhood Association is very active. It's got a newsletter, it's very well organized and things like that, and the police chief can come to this group and give his update on what's going on in the town in terms of public safety and crime. But if you're not in this room, you don't benefit from that information. Okay, so if the chief was to do a similar thing, he'd have to go all to the different organizations throughout town in order to do the same thing. So actually, one of the residents, who's actually in this room, but I won't name him, had talked about something that I thought could actually be built upon. He said, was there kind of a public safety committee that exists for the entire town that I could participate in? Because I'm not just concerned about crime in my area, but I'm concerned about the entire town as well. And so I built on that concept when I formed this organization. What I did was I brought together the different neighborhood associations, the heads of those organizations, and I brought Chief Semino into that organization. Okay? And what we do is we have these meetings, quarterly meetings, where he actually gives an update to the residents in terms of what's going on. So it's more efficient for him, because obviously he can do that, but also they're getting the information to interact directly with the police chief and talk about the things that he's doing and how it's affecting their particular parts of town. Okay? The other thing, again, building upon this, was I'm also having representatives of the different departments that are responsible for our quality of life in Maplewood to come to these meetings as well. So for example, Eric Burbank, who's the head of Department of Public Works, or Tom Malavasi, who's head of the engineering department. They're responsible for paving the roads and signs and speed bumps and things like that. And Bob Mittermeier, who's head of the Code Enforcement Committee. They've come and they've actually given presentations on what their respective groups do. And then again, the residents have the opportunity to give feedback to them directly in terms of what they're doing and how it affects what's going on in their particular parts of town. Okay? So these meetings go on regularly. Measurable impacts, it's maybe a bit more qualitative, frankly, but when the residents are in the meeting and they talk about it, they say to me, Marlon, that was great. Having the opportunity to, number one, talk face to face with the people who are in the township, talk face to face with my peers and other organizations, okay, and learn from them. In the last meeting, there were people in one of the more younger, I'm going to call it, neighborhood associations, and they were talking with someone from the Hilton Neighborhood Association. I heard them saying, hey, hey, I'm talking about how do you do this? And so now the people in the Hilton Neighborhood Association say, hey, this is what we do, and by the way, you should come to our next meeting so that you can pick up some things as well. Okay? The other thing I look to, frankly, also is again, it's a bit more of a qualitative measure, if you would. But are these people coming from the different parts of town? Who's coming to these meetings? Are they, are they different kinds of people? I'm going to call it, if you would. You know, younger people, older people, black, white, men, women. You know, there's a spectrum of different people who are coming to this meeting because it's an opportunity for now all the different parts of Maplewood to come together to talk about these different things that are going on. Now, it's my objective, again, this just started this year. I started it earlier this year. And this is me, nobody else, okay? It's my objective, my desire, that I think every part of Maplewood should be covered by a neighborhood association, okay? And I would like for all those representatives to be coming to this MCAP meeting and for that to become one of the vehicles by which we disseminate information to residents and for them to come back. Because, oh, by the way, one of the things that we say, and if you've gone to this meeting, you've heard me say this, is that this is a working meeting, okay? The people who are coming, these residents, they have a homework assignment. If what they learn in this meeting stops with them, then hey, you're in the know, hey, that's good, and we can talk amongst ourselves. That's great. But your responsibility is actually now to take what you've learned in this meeting and bring it back to your respective parts of town and share it with your neighbors and friends, hence the community building aspect of things, okay? And the other thing also is now also to go back and get the information from those parts of town and bring it to the next meeting, okay? So that's an initiative. Sorry if I've kind of talked everybody's ear off here, but again, I just wanted to elaborate on that because that's an initiative I'm proud of. And then again, the residents, I think, who have attended these meetings have felt that they've been good.
The next step maybe is how you
Wait,
disseminate that meeting.
did you want to hear
Yeah,
that?
sure.
And then we'll add, I think one question, unless we don't have any other ones. Yes, Art, did you want to add anything or
I don't
Kurt?
think you can answer that question.
Excuse
I don't
me?
think the question's relevant.
I thought you had wanted to, okay, I thought you wanted to see what.
No, the question I would ask them as prospective candidates is we don't have their record to be able to assess them, right? With Vic and Marlon and other members of the Township Committee, we do, and we can sort of tell what they believe and what's important to them. So I guess my question for Art and Kurt is you know, convince us of a belief or value that you feel may be missing in the Township Committee today, or maybe will enhance what's happening in the Township Committee.
Okay, Art, did you want to?
Sure, absolutely. About 4 weeks ago, I sent out a survey to a number of Maplewood residents and asked them what their biggest issues were in town. And these are the issues, there are about 9 of them that are really big other than just taxes. It's a given. But the initial, there were 9 large issues that the survey revealed. Number 1 was, and these are issues that I would like to engage immediately. Local government transparency was number 1. Decisions concerning the old police station and the current residential replacement structure. A lot of people don't like that particular structure very much. And don't think it was a good idea the way it was handled. Decision regarding the D-Hart project here for the change, the adding of either astroturf or grass or whatever, and the problems that ensued after it was implemented. The cost of township administration. Apparently there are a number of assistants in town that they'd like to address and find out why it's costing us for those. The Maplewood Pool was another issue where it's been changed from a self-sufficient organization to a township-run asset. The purchase of Springfield Avenue and the costs that are associated with purchasing the Springfield Avenue from the county. Purchase of the Women's Club certainly was another issue. And paying $1 million for 60 parking spaces right now is an issue. The apparent emasculation, this is one of my favorites, the emasculation of the county, the Citizen Budget Advisory Committee that no longer exists. Why not? And the current and future status of the downtown post office property, that hit number 1.5. Really close. So those issues are all issues that I would engage in almost immediately. And I would like to represent the town's voice, not just the township committee's voice.
Kurt, did you want to add anything?
I'm agreeing with Art. we need more transparency, communication, and collaboration amongst the citizens in town. There have been some statements that it's hard to get people involved, but there are a lot of people that do want to get involved. If you're trying to follow along with the township, it's very difficult to understand where things are going. You might hear it through the grapevine, you might find it on Maplewood Online, thank you, Jamie. You might not find it on the township's website. Communication committee, when are their meetings? It's not on the website, it's on a little piece of paper, posted on the bulletin board. Where are the minutes? No minutes on the website. So where would you find those things? Internet's been around for almost 20 years. We could use that old technology to start communicating, emails, ways to get this information out. We could be doing that a whole lot better. And I think that from my background as a management consultant, I'm in a position where I have to collaborate. I go into an organization and I am given a team of people that I have to work with. I don't get to pick and choose, but everybody has a great idea. And the idea is understanding what they're contributing and building a great solution out of it. Many times I don't even just go with the team I'm given. I will go beyond. I will ask who is the knowledge, who owns this knowledge, and go find it. That's the ability that I bring to the Township Committee, is the understanding of various different things. And I'm forced to do that. And I think collaboration is the best way to get the best solution. Organizations that are closed limit themselves, and you can see it right away. Small companies, very strong owner-operator, they only grow to a limited amount. You go to a company like Mitsubishi, wide open. The sky's the limit, because they understand that all the best knowledge is not in the brain of one person. There's only so many Steve Jobs out there. We have to collaborate and access the best knowledge, the knowledge of all the best people.
Thank you. I think we better go on and see if there's another question. If we have time later, but yes, we have one here.
Hi. I've heard some of the things that you said this evening. I do have some concerns. I don't want to be the skunk of the church speaking, but no one's discussed crime. And I'm really curious about your survey, because obviously, just today my daughter's phone was stolen in school. She goes to Columbia High School. On Maplewood Online, they mentioned someone being mugged at Tuscan School. It's a shooting in a park. And I understand that your issues are with the Township Committee, and you mentioned making it livable for empty nesters. Crime is a really serious thing. Fear factor is a very serious thing. What is your solution for that? Never mind the Township Committee, what is your individual solution?
I just want to say one thing is that I think you came in a little late. There was some discussion of crime, but I think we could continue.
Okay, well, please help me out with it.
If I can, actually, she's correct. Marlon gave an excellent answer, and I agree with everything that they've been going on. What I would like to see more of, I would like to see if we can hire our officers locally, or try to encourage them to live in our town. I talked to many people about this, and they say the cost of living in Maplewood is very tough. So, if we could encourage our officers and our safety professionals to live in town, I think that would be a plus. Also, I like that we are doing more community policing, where people are engaging the people in town rather than policing from a police car. They're policing on foot and interacting with people. But we want to make sure that anything that we do does not decrease the level of service that we have. Right? Our police officers give us great response and fantastic service. So anything that we do, we have to consider that we want this to be a supplement to what we're doing, not in exchange for what we're doing now. I would support bringing more officers to have things like community policing.
Or
Yeah, certainly. And Marlon, of course, is the safety liaison, and he has a better handle on what the crime rates are now. My position is that we need more eyes on the street, whether it be police officers or whether it be surveillance or monitoring TVs or camera systems. Neighborhood associations are real critical. And if we, it's the old saying, if you see it, say it. I think that's one of the keys. Unfortunately, my survey was 3 weeks ago, and these crime statistics, which are just recently occurred didn't take those into account. I think if I sent out today, that would have certainly been one of the top ones.
Marlon?
I'm chomping at the bit a little bit here.
For sure.
First of all, in terms of eyes on the street, sorry. First of all, in terms of eyes on the street, one of the things I did do is, I think I mentioned earlier as chair of the Public Safety Committee, was I did authorize Chief Semino to take advantage of overtime, if you will, for the police officer. So, in other words, it's about presence, okay? You have a cop here. If you don't have a cop here, you can accomplish that in two ways. You can hire another police officer, or you can have the police officer who is here doing overtime and also being there as well, okay? There's a difference between the two, obviously, because one, you're hiring a police officer, you've got to pay their medical benefits and things like that. Overtime, you're already on staff, okay? The other thing is, and I was just chomping a little bit here, and it may be because I'm out and I'm talking to people in real life. I'm not kind of doing these sort of theoretical, abstract surveys and kind of talking like that or whatever. But when you just went through that list of 9 things there in your survey, and I didn't hear crime, public safety mentioned once, I found that hard to believe. That you know, I'm looking at people in the room who I've talked to about public safety. And I don't think they're alone, because I've talked to many people, and to think that there's a survey done, and of the top things that people are concerned about, you know, the pool, I don't want to denigrate any of those particular things, because people are concerned about those things. As I said in my opening remarks, everything is important to somebody, but I find it hard to believe that, you know, that survey, other things, I keep hearing about Maplewood Village, post office, you know, things like that, and no talk about some of the other things that are going on. And it just seems like there's a little bit of maybe a self-selection process, kind of an echo chamber going on there, and I'm not sure that that's truly a representative sampling of what's going on in the entire township of Maplewood, not just within a particular small segment of it. If I'm looking around this room here, I'd be willing to bet that there is at least 1 or 2 people who are concerned about public safety. And I think
would be one of them.
But hey, did you maybe you didn't answer the survey. I don't know.
I did.
So okay, all right. So that was just something that I wanted to mention. But again, in terms of something concrete, as I mentioned before, authorizing use of overtime in the wake of the Maple Crest Park incident, improving the lights, talking with security cameras, and talking about doing that for the other parks in town this year. Those are specific things that I've authorized as chair of the Public Safety Committee, and there's other things that we'll be doing as well.
Thank you. We have time, I think, for one more question. I think you're a member of the family, so I don't know if it would be fair, okay?
Remember the family? Oh, okay.
His family. Let's have this gentleman. I'm sorry.
All right, Bob Perez, I've been a resident of Maplewood for 36 years, and I am concerned about taxes. We don't talk about them because it's said there's nothing we can do about it. But I don't believe personally that that's true. I'd like to hear what the candidates feel about zero-based budgeting in order to justify each and every program and expenditure each year. Pool's not important, but that pool was self-sustaining until about a dozen years ago. Not a penny of township money was ever spent in that pool. When the township recognized that there was a surplus in that pool, that was taken. And it's been taken for a dozen years. I'm not sure what the amounts were. At the beginning, it was $50,000, $60,000 for that first year. Now the pool is a debtor.
Do you have a question now?
Yes, this park right here was redone. And the township selected the company, even who sued over selecting the company, and I think it's been done twice. So I'm not sure whether the cost of this park doubled because of the long, work that was done to begin with. So we can control expenditures if we use some resources in town.
What is your question?
The question is, how can you begin not only to hold taxes down, but maybe reduce them in town so people like me don't have to leave?
Does anyone want to?
Well, one of the things you mentioned in there, you mentioned a number of different things. You talked about zero-based budgeting as an example, as a tool to justify every expense. The reality of the situation is, if you look at the township budget, okay, you start with zero. Are we going to have police in the town? Probably yes. Are we going to have firefighters in the town? Probably yes. Are we going to have Department of Public Works? Do we have leaf collection? Probably yes. Salaries and wages of these people and the pensions and all that, you're starting to add up to pretty much most of where we are now anyway.
Are you asking me?
No, I'm telling you.
Oh, I would answer.
So-
I don't believe you're 100% on top of this question.
Let's let the candidate.
Okay.
Okay. So when you start with zero and you start adding in these major chunks of things and add it up, that's going to add up to a substantial portion of the budget. I'm talking about the municipal portion of the budget because yes, you've also got, when you get your tax bill, you've got schools, all right, which is 58 to 60 cents on the dollar of your tax bill, okay? You've got the county, which is another 15, 16%, okay? So in terms of the amount that the municipal portion is and controlling that piece, and again, I've started to add up the pieces to add up to that, that actually represents not the majority of your tax bill.
I understand.
Okay, all right. So, again, we're talking about zero-based budgeting. Anybody who's looked at the budget, and I respect you've run for the Township Committee before as well, I'm sure you've looked at it. It's not a whole lot of different things that you can go in there. I mean, the Citizens Budget Advisory Committee that spoke about years ago agreed that there's not a lot of fat in the budget, okay? So that's not, we talk about, administrative waste and things like that. There's not a whole lot that can be garnered from that. But that's number one. You asked a number of questions, and I want to give my colleagues a chance to speak as well, but was there another aspect here?
What happened to all the pool money over the years that's been taken by the administration for...
I can't speak to, you mentioning some things that happened even before I was on the Township
It's been
Committee.
happening for a dozen years every year.
No, I haven't seen that, so I beg to differ.
Okay,
How much did how much the cost overrun into Hartfield?
I don't have the number off the top of my head.
Okay, but there was a cost overrun into Hartfield.
I think that depends on how you define a cost overrun.
Well, if the work is done,
I think we'll go on to the next.
and again, I guess it was...
we will let our next candidate respond if you want.
Okay.
All right?
Yeah, I do in fact have the annual budget here in front of me. The biggest one that...
Can't hear you, Art.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Oh, sorry.
I do in fact have the budget right here. It's a 50-page budget. Actually, the whole document is 70 pages. That includes a lot of the agenda from the last meeting. The one that pops out right away to me is the debt service, municipal debt service, over $5 million. That's a lot of money. I'd like to see what that's all about. What are we paying for our debt service? Where is that going?
That's just the interest, Art?
I'm sorry?
That's just the interest?
Yeah, exactly. I also see a lot of funds that are being funded. It says this fund, that fund, and I can go over this if you want. But there's a lot of them, and I don't know what they mean. And again, this is where the transparency issue comes in. I would love to know, and I would love to have this CBSC or CBAC come back again, so they in fact will sit down with the budget and see what it's going to. I'm sure it's all very legitimate, but I just don't know what it is, and I'd like to know.
Kurt, did you want to add anything?
Well, I just want to mention something. If the municipal government just closed its doors, the typical taxpayer would save like $3,500. But like Marlon said, we'd have no police, no fire, nothing like that. I think where we need to focus is keeping the balance between dinks and empty nesters and school children, because our biggest chunk of our taxes is the school. Dinks. Dual income, no kids.
Oh, okay. Like jargon, I'm sorry.
Dinks and sinks, there's all that jargon. Couple townships over, town that I grew up in, Elizabeth just got the shock of their lives when the school system expanded and built a couple school buildings to accommodate the growing school children population. This was all within caps. They didn't have any ability to vote to override it, and their property taxes jumped up. Now, their property taxes only jumped up like about $100 per household. Fortunately for them, the state and everybody else pays for their school system. But still, at $100, everybody was in shock. The mayor went and appealed it, and he lost the appeal. So I think we have to look and make sure that we manage, try to if we can, manage from behind the growth of the school enrollment. Now, I believe that there is opportunities to find some sort of savings inside the municipal budget. I mean, we just had our road paved. It looks fantastic. It's beautiful. But it was fine. The road was fine. It didn't need to be repaved. And then there's other roads in Maplewood that look like the bomb, like Baghdad after it was bombed, you know, before they even get potholes filled. So I think we really need to be looking at, you know, our municipal infrastructure from a long-term perspective. You know, but there was probably a reason our road got paved. I don't know why. I don't think it was because I lived there. But thanks again that we have a nice, beautiful road. So I think there's areas there. Also, let's talk about transparency in the budget. It's all about context. So the public published budget, it's almost meaningless until you understand what's going on in those numbers. Okay, that looks like a big number. What does that mean? You know, how do we internally break every program down? I remember Jerry Ryan mentioning that they're now going to start looking to see what the additional costs were for all the programs, all the community programs. Now, I believe in the community programs. I think they're great community building things. It's interesting to see what the additional cost is for like trash collection and police enforcement. But I'm surprised that we just didn't do that to begin with, you know. And it might be happening, but it's not part of the published budget. Also, if you look at the things that we go in debt for, like some of it, I'm looking at computer equipment. Now, computer equipment has a typical life of about 5 years, but a bond has a life of maybe 15 years. So the bond, we're still paying it after we've retired the computer equipment. So maybe some of these things we don't need to go in debt for, you know. And there's probably other areas like that that we can like pay as we go. Thank you.
Thank you. I think we're going to move on to our closing statements now. And according to my list, it would be Marlon's turn to start because the last question was started with Kurt, answered by Kurt first. So this would be our closing statement. Every candidate has 2 minutes. Thank you.
And I know I opened first, so that's why I was
It just worked
kind of
out
curious.
that way. I'm like,
That's
sure.
fine. Okay, once again, I'd like to thank the Hilton Neighborhood Association. Thank you, Carol, for coming, for hosting this night's forum, and I'd like to thank each of you for coming here tonight. I know that I've been fortunate to be able to be on the Maplewood Township Committee and serve you as an elected official for the past 3 years, and you know, I've listened carefully when you've told me about your concerns, your ideas, and it's been gratifying to see when some of those ideas and others that I've initiated become a reality. I'll admit that it's also been frustrating at times as well, when sometimes something that I felt was a good choice went in a different direction, some things I didn't get a chance to talk to you about tonight. But that's the beauty of having multiple people with multiple perspectives coming together to make decisions. To those of you who've called me, written to me, and spoken to me over the past 3 years, I've learned a lot from you, from listening to your concerns and working through the issues that you've raised. And do know that if I'm reelected, I will continue to advocate on your behalf. You know, I've often quoted the words of former presidential candidate Shirley Chisholm, who said that service is the rent that we pay for the privilege of living here on earth. I'm hopeful that in some way, I'm living up to the challenge inherent in those words. So let me cut to the chase. I'm facing uncharted waters in this year's election. There's no presidential elections. I won't get the benefit from the uptick in voters that come out for that. The last time I ran, there was no gubernatorial election. And this time there is, and with Governor Christie being the Republican incumbent, who knows how much turnout there'll be because of that. The Board of Education election has been moved to November as well, and that's something that no other person in the Township Committee has had to deal with. So I'm asking you to please come out and vote for me on November 5th so I can continue to advocate for the things that you've talked to me about. I believe that collectively we're headed in the right direction, but the challenges remain and there's still so much work to be done. We cannot afford to be derailed from the progress that we've made, and I look forward to having the opportunity to take on those challenges for all of Maplewood, for you, during another term on the Maplewood Township Committee. All of us moving forward together. Thank you.
Thank you. Art?
And once again, I thank you, Carol, the Hilton Neighborhood Association, and everybody here for coming here to listen. I've kept most of my answers short, primarily because I'm having a real hard time speaking, so you have to excuse me. I probably have a lot more to say, but this has been a struggle, a little bit of a struggle. But as a lifelong resident of Maplewood, I care about its future, certainly. I've been active in the community. I've been involved with the VFW. I've been involved with the 4th of July Committee. I've been involved with the Glee Club. I've been involved with the strollers. But I'm glad you mentioned a presidential quote, because I'm going to make one of those too. While I take inspiration from the past, I look to the future. What I consider one of our great presidents said that. I propose the following list of ideas, though, for implementation for the betterment of the community. First of all, encourage and provide actions which will encourage and enable our seniors to remain in this town. Make Maplewood more business-friendly. Extend shared services with neighboring committees, but not degrade those services. Negotiate with lower-cost services, products, and supplies in concert with neighboring towns, basically through a buying consortium. Reach out to many service organizations which are in town for support in the vast number of projects that are wanted, needed, and required. And encourage the police department to maintain the crime rate, the low crime rate we've been able to do. I'm running for the Township Committee specifically because I care about Maplewood, and I commit to the following propositions. That when I do win the seat in November, I will serve as the voice of all Maplewoodians. I will form opinions and votes based upon facts, not on personal or political ideology. I commit that your voices will be heard, and I will represent and vote in what I consider to be the best interests in Maplewood, not merely based upon the views of current Township Committee majority. Thank you.
Kurt?
I'd like to once again thank Carol for putting and the Hilton Neighborhood Association for putting this forum together, and everybody that came to participate and ask questions and share their opinions. I'll keep it short and sweet. I think we can be doing a lot better. I'm encouraged by, I've probably knocked on thousands of doors, introducing myself, and I'm very much encouraged by the people that agree with me that we can be doing better, and we should be doing better. I only hope that everybody that agrees with me comes out and votes for me. So I'd like to encourage everybody to come out and vote for me on November 5th. I will serve everybody tirelessly. I have been doing my homework and reading up on all the issues, and reading outside and learning about municipal government, and urban planning, budgeting, and everything that's necessary for the position. It's something that I do as a consultant. I have to learn about the requirements of my clients, and this is very familiar to me. I'm very familiar with how the best organizations run, and I would like to bring that experience to the Township Committee. Thank you.
I'd like to thank all of the candidates for being willing to spend the huge amount of time that's necessary when you are on the Township Committee. I hope that if there are people who didn't have a chance to ask a question, that while you're enjoying our refreshments, you'll be able to speak individually with everyone here. I also need your help, excuse me, if you could help put the chairs back against the side of the wall when we're done with our meeting. So thank you very much for coming, and I also want to thank the organizations that are taping this so that more people can hear the information that we heard tonight. Thank you. Good night.